Hello everybody, my name is Rachel and welcome to a sort of weekly wrap-up. I have read 10 things since I last did a weekly wrap-up and then all my filming stuff got interrupted for various reasons. So I'm going to split stuff into two parts. This video is going to be all the things that I read since my last wrap-up that were not for Book Buddy-a-thon, and then I'll have a separate video about the 5 things that I read for the read-a-thon last week. I am filming in this weird location because I busted my hip in yoga a couple of days ago, and I find I can't sit on the floor or in a chair for a very long period of time without it getting kind of weird. So I'm kneeling instead, and I actually hope that this works out pretty well because though setting up the camera is kind of weird, it's so much more comfortable for me kneeling on my knees like this. So much nicer. If I move around too much though, because I do that, I will have to figure something else out. Anyway, books. The first book that I have to talk about is Cibola Burn by James S. A. Corey. This is the 4th book in the Expanse series. It's chronicling events in the solar system, major political events, wars between Earth and Mars and the Belt Organization, the OPA, and basically everything is being reshaped with alien influences and other planets and everything. It's just crazy out there. This 4th book, of course, we're getting farther into the plot of the overall series, and I don't want to spoil too much stuff, but basically the crew of the Rocinante goes to a planet they are sent by the UN, by a character named Ursula who works at the UN, to mediate in a little shooting war between these squatters on the planet and then the people who have the actual right to colonize the planet. They want to kick the squatters off, and the squatters are like, no, we belong here now. And I don't know why they thought it was a good idea to send Holden to mediate, because don't people tend to notice that things blow up around him? This book is not very good. I'm honest about that. It doesn't know what it wants its plot to be. Every 50 to 100 pages, a new thing is introduced and suddenly the story is about that. It's just all over the place. It really felt like the authors had this grab bag of story ideas and they couldn't make any of them novel lengths. They just threw them all into one book and said, we're going to use all these ideas. And it was a mess. And it wasn't helped that there are always multiple point of view characters. There are new point of view characters in almost all the books. There are about 4, I think. And this one of them was Bazia, who's one of the squatters on this planet, and he was a mopey, annoying person. He was sort of a wannabe regretful terrorist, and then he's just complaining about how his past decisions are jeopardizing his relationship with his wife and his children, and I just wanted him to shut up. The other one that I really didn't like was Elvie. She's a scientist who comes with the legal colonists, and she is everything you do not want to see in a female scientist in a book. It's a horrible representation of a female scientist. She's extremely over-emotional. She develops this instantaneous crush on Holden. She lets it influence her work. She can't function as a scientist until she literally gets laid with a guy who comes up to her and says, I've always wanted to have sex with you. The reason you can't do your work is because you need to get laid. Hey, I'm here. And then she has sex with him. And then it's okay. And I'm like, no! Don't do that to a female character. She wasn't a bad person. I actually really felt for her. She had some insecurities and she was like really shy about speaking in public and everything, and I felt so much for her in those cases. By the time I got to 90% in this book, I was praying for it to be over because it just kept dragging on. Then I read Unlocking the Air, stories by Ursula K. Le Guin. This is a very slim collection of her literary mainstream stories, many of which I had kind of read before. A couple of them, like Half Past 4 and Ether Oregon, are longer stories that I had already read in the first volume of her The Unreal and the Real collection, which is a fantastic collection. But I'll be honest, I do not enjoy Le Guin's mainstream and literary work nearly as much as her speculative fiction. They're always the things that I like least by her, and this was not an exception to that trend. I will never reread this. I don't think it was very memorable. I don't regret spending the $7 to get it, but I don't think I'd really recommend it either. I think that many of her other collections and stories are a lot better. Next is Thomas the Rhymer by Ellen Kushner, which I very much enjoyed. This is a quiet, graceful retelling of the Thomas the Rhymer or True Thomas's tale, which is of a bard or a harper named Thomas who goes about life impressing the ladies, seducing many of them, and being quite proud in his talents. And then he attracts the attention of the Queen of Fairyland. She takes him back to Fairyland. He stays there for 7 years. He learns that's not all it's cracked up to be. He kind of wants to go home. And then when he comes home after his 7 years of servitude to the Queen, she gives him the gift of the tongue that cannot lie. So when he returns home after being gone for 7 years, and he goes back to the couple that are almost like surrogate parents for him, that have taken care of him, and been his only friends perhaps. And then he also returns to the woman that he had loved and kind of promised himself to, and he can't lie to them. They don't really believe that he's been in Fairyland, but he can't make up another story that's more believable, and he has to kind of win them over, and he has to learn to live with what's basically a prophetic ability, because if somebody asks him a question and he answers it, he can't lie, which means he has to tell the truth. So even if he doesn't know, like consciously know what the answer is when he starts to speak, he will tell the truth. He will say the thing. The entire story is, like I said, quiet and a very elegant, graceful, and thoughtful retelling. But it's the ending when Thomas reaches those mature years, when he has had these experiences and he has to live with this curse/gift of not being able to lie, and how that affects his life and his family and everything up until his deathbed. It was touching. The end was a little heartbreaking. I enjoyed having a more contemplative reading of it and not rushing through it. And this does seem to be a very highly regarded retelling of the True Thomas tale, so I would recommend this to people who enjoy fairy tale retellings. Next is a delightful collection of poems and stories, almost like flash fiction, that I could only describe as being sweet. And that is The Honey Month by Amal El-Mohtar. It's a very short collection, less than 100 pages, of responses that El-Mohtar wrote to honey. One of her friends gave her little taste tester vials of about 30 different types of honey, and one February she sat down, she tasted and smelled and looked at a vial of honey every day, and she wrote a poem or a very short story inspired by that type of honey, and it's just beautiful. They were almost like palate cleansers. They were very cute and sweet and just totally evocative of the honey that she was describing. It made me crave honey so much. I'm not really I don't really get science fiction and fantasy poetry, even though I attempt to read all the poetry in the magazines I'm subscribed to, and I was impressed that one of the stories I read by El-Mohtar, I actually got. Like, I really like the form of poetry that she writes. It's I think less experimental. It has more of a structure to it. I don't know how to talk about poetry in any way, but I can usually recognize what I like, and trying to describe what that is a bit harder. Probably my favorite thing from the entire collection of The Honey Month is one of the very first poems is called Peach Creamed Honey. Wow, it's probably the most erotic, sensual poem about eating a peach I have ever read. It was beautiful and almost made me uncomfortable in how really sensual it was. Not the kind of thing I would usually read or seek out, but wow. That one was noteworthy. The last thing that I want to talk about in this video is Hannu Rajaniemi's collected fiction, which is a collection of all of his short stories that have been published to date, including a couple that I believe are original to this. I liked this immensely. It's a bit hard to talk about short story collections unless I want to be really, really long and detailed and discuss every single story. I enjoyed every story in this except for the last two, which are Snow White is Dead and then Unused Tomorrows and Other Stories. All the other stories I quite enjoyed. Deus Ex Homine, The Server and the Dragon was definitely one of my favorites. Taiki and the Ants was also interesting. Not quite sure I understand the ending of it, like what the situation actually was, but it was very Rajaniemi. The Haunting of Apollo A7LB is about a haunted astronaut suit, and that was really cool. Elegy for a Young Elk had a lot of Finnish elements, and actually Maya from Maya Reads has just put up a video about pronunciation of the Finnish names and terms in this. She goes through all the stories and gives you the pronunciations of all the words except for the curse words. Sorry, Maya. I had to mention that. It was really, really helpful and also gives you some of the flavor of some of the stories, I think. The Jugad Cathedral, also really liked that. Invisible Planets is kind of an homage to Italo Calvito's Invisible Cities, I think it's called, which I haven't read, but I thought I recognized the reference, so it was really pretty cool. Ghost Dogs was creepy. A kid having to confront the nasty dog ghosts in her house. Shibuya No Love, I didn't like that one as much, but it was also kind of scary. Satan's Typist, did not. That was very, very short and also kind of terrifying. It doesn't hurt at all that all of these stories have elements to them that I recognize from the Guin Le Flambour series that I love so much by Rajaniemi. I believe it's because of the work he does, perhaps with quantum physics or string theory or whatever. He has a lot of quantum theory and a lot of stories that meld like the future of online gaming, of those immersive gaming experiences with quantum technology, and I find that to be a very interesting combination. Someday I will reread the Guin Le Flambour series and I will recognize more of those elements that I missed the first time because I didn't quite get it. I just recognized it in its smaller form a lot more readily in these stories and want to go back and reread the trilogy just to get more out of it. So those are the 5 things that I've read recently that were not for Book Buddy-a-thon, and then my next video, or my next sort of wrap-up video, will be the 5 things I did read for the readathon, so look forward to that. If you have any thoughts on the things that I talked about in this video, please comment down below and let me know. And yeah, thank you very much for watching, and I will talk to you again soon. Bye.